again to our science class, and this time I will make use my DIY whiteboard. So ginawa ko lang to whiteboard in order for us to have our discussion. Okay, so from our previous videos on Module 1, 2, and 3, we discussed about the circulatory and the respiratory system, and we connect them together on how they are working together. And we also study about the healthy lifestyles that you should have in order to protect your respiratory and the circulatory system. So now, in this module, we will now move to another topic, which is a new chapter of our discussion. And this video would all about be genetics. So in the genetics, we will focus on the non-Mendelian inheritance. But before we discuss about the non-Mendelian inheritance, let us first have a review on how we make a crosses. What do we mean by crosses? So meaning to say, we will first practice on the monohybrid cross in order for us to have our lesson for the module number 4. So before we formally start our discussion on our video part 1, let us have first an unlocking of terms which are somewhat unfamiliar to you since we are to enter a new chapter in our discussion. So those words are monohybrid cross, genotype, phenotype, alleles, dominant, recessive, homozygous dominant, heterozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, and Punnett square. So those words are what you will hear mostly in our discussion today. Okay, so the study of genetics is the study of hereditary information in which we are able to understand how do we get the traits, which is mainly coming from our mother and our father since they are our parents. So in this module and on the next videos that we will discuss, we will may identify how do we inherit the traits that our parents have. And somewhat, marirealize natin kung bakit ang mga kapitbahay natin ay palagi na lang umiimik na kamukha mo yung tatay mo, mas kamukha mo yung nanay mo, para kang yung nanay mo, para kang yung tatay mo. So in this lesson on the genetics, magkakaroon na tayo ngayon na mas malinaw na pag-unawa kung paano ba natin namamana ang traits na galing sa ating parents. So on the first part of our video will be a review on the monohybrid cross. What do we mean by monohybrid cross? So when we say mono, which means one, hybrid wherein we will hybrid two different alleles, and we will identify what would be the result of the two alleles. What do we mean by alleles? These alleles are referring to the characteristic or the traits. For example, curly hair and straight hair. So we have two contrasting alleles, dalawang magkaibang characteristic. Or for example, a blue eyes and a brown eyes. Or a fair complexion and a dark complexion. Or will perform a cross between two contrasting traits, dalawang magkaibang traits, and we will identify what would be the result of these traits using the monohybrid cross. So we should be able to practice and perfect how to crossbreed in a monohybrid cross using a Punnett square, because this lesson will be as just the same of what we will do with the next lessons. So let's get into the monohybrid cross. So in the monohybrid cross, we will focus on one allele. Okay. So when we say allele, this allele is referring to the characteristic. So let us have, for example, a flower color. So for example, we have a purple flower and a white flower. So in the monohybrid cross, we wanted to know the result of the offspring. When we say offspring, yung kalalabasan niya. kapag kinross natin silang dalawa, anong kayang magiging kulay ng resulta? O for example, the mother and the father, nanay at tatay. Kapag nag-cross ang isang nanay at ang isang tatay, ano kayang kalalabasan na anak? So when we say monohybrid cross, we will only focus on one characteristic or one allele, and we are referring to the color of the flower. So for example, that we have two colors of the flower, purple and white. So in these two colors, dapat malaman muna natin which of the two is the dominant and the recessive. The dominant one will be the purple and the recessive will be the white. So this is the dominant, letter D, and this is the recessive, letter R. Now, in order for us to represent the dominant and the recessive trait, we will make use of a letter. To represent a dominant allele, we're using capital letters. So for example, I wanted to use letter P. So to represent the dominant allele, which is the purple, I will make use of a capital P. 2 capital P, which is our parent. And since the white color of the flower is the recessive, siya yung hindi halos nakikita or madalang nating makita, I will make use of a small letter. So in this one, you will just take note that capital letters are for the dominant and the small letters are for the recessive. So we will have a cross between a purple flower and a white flower. So these two alleles will be our P generation. So when we say P generation, that is our parental. Diba sila yung parents? This would be, for example, the mother, and this would be, for example, the father. Then those are our parents in the monohybrid cross. Now, we wanted to know what would be the color of the flower if we cross a dominant purple and a recessive white. So, para malaman natin yung magiging resulta ng cross natin with the purple and the white flower, gumagamit tayo ng diagram. And this diagram composed of 4 boxes. And this box is called Punnett square. So, dito sa Punnett square, ang ilalaman natin dito is the dominant at the top, capital P, tigisa silang box, and then the recessive would be on the side. So, we use a small letter P, and the other one would be sa bottom, a small letter P as well. So, we will take a cross between the dominant and the recessive using our Punnett square. Yung magiging laman ng first box is coming from this one na nasa taas, multiply. So, we will multiply this two, at yung resulta ng cross nila will be on the first box. So, we have capital P and a small letter P. So, that's for the first box. For the second box, sa katabi, we will have the cross between this one and this one. Now, if you would notice, yung cross na ginagawa natin is according to the arrangement of the box as well as yung kapantay niya sa taas at sa tabi. So, since ito yung box natin, the cross will be coming from yung nasa taas niya at yung nasa tabing letter. So, this one is capital and the other one is a small letter. So, we have capital and a small letter. So, we're done with the top part. So, we will now have the second column, yung baba. So, dun sa baba, again, ito yung column natin. So, manggagaling siya dun sa given natin siya sa nasa taas. Then, we'll be able to multiply it for the letter na nandun naman sa baba. So, we have again a capital P and another small letter P. So, we now have the third box. And then the last one again, will be coming from the letter at the top and the letter at its side. So we have again a capital letter P and a small letter P. Let us now discuss the result of our monohybrid cross with the purple flower and the white flower. So as we can see from the diagram that we have produced from the purple and the white flower, we have produced 4 homologous result, which is 1 capital and 1 small letter. So let us discuss about the letters that we have produced. Kanina sabi natin, on our letter for the dominant, we make use of 2 capital letters. Capital letter P and the other one is a capital letter P, and that's the dominant. Then, on the recessive trait, we make use of a small letter P and another small letter P, which represents another recessive. Now, what will be the name if we have 1 capital and 1 small letter? So that is again a dominant trait. How come? Now, kapag ang lumabas is 1 capital and 1 small letter, we name it as heterozygous dominant. So meaning to say, kahit meron siyang maliit na letra, ang tawag pa rin sa kanya is dominant. Then, if your letters is of the same letter, for example, dalawang capital letters, then we name it as homozygous dominant. From the word homo means the same, we produce the same letter of both capital, then we name it as homozygous dominant. Since the letter is capital, so that is dominant. Then, for the recessive, which is 2 small letter, so we name it as homozygous recessive. Homo again means the same, and then we produce a homozygous recessive or recessive itself. Kahit hindi na natin siya lagyan ng homozygous because we have no other letter for the recessive. Sadyang dalawang maliit na letra lang para sa recessive. While we have 2 types of dominant, one is homozygous and the other one is heterozygous. Hetero means magkaiba. Kasi isang malaki at isang maliit na letra, ibig sabihin magkaibang letra sila. Then we name it as heterozygous but still dominant. So we have 2 classes of dominant. We have homozygous and heterozygous, dominant parehas. Then we have a recessive, which is 2 small letters. Okay, so let us go back with our cross between the purple flower and the white flower. Now, on our result, which is a heterozygous dominant flower, and it produces 4 heterozygous dominant flower, let us have now the genotypic ratio and the phenotypic ratio. This is our diagram produced after the cross. So we have 4. Again, sabi natin, magkaibang letra, isang malaki at isang maliit. Then we call it as heterozygous dominant. Titingnan natin ngayon yung mga letra. So, ang nakikita natin ay 4 na magkakaparehas na letra. So, we now have the ratio of 4 is to 0 or percentage 100%. Since iisang itsura ng letra ang nakikita natin, then we have 4 because we only have 4 boxes. So, we have 4 heterozygous dominant kasi ang tawag natin sa letra na isang malaki at isang maliit ay heterozygous and we consider it as dominant. Then, our genotypic ratio is 4 is to 0 heterozygous dominant or 100% heterozygous dominant. Then, on the other hand, the phenotypic ratio, which is the expression of the trait, is, since sabi natin ang dominant is kulay purple, then our phenotype would be 4 purple flower or 100% purple flower. So that would be our genotypic ratio and the phenotypic ratio. Again, if you're talking about the genotypic ratio, that's referring to the letters that is expressed in your Punnett square. Yung itsura ng mga letra na nakikita mo sa Punnett square. Since apat ang nakikita mong pare-parehas, then your genotype is 4 or 100%. Then name it if it is heterozygous, homozygous, dominant, or recessive. Then, again, for the phenotype, you will make use of the characteristic or the expression of the trait, since we're talking about the purple and the white flower, so that would be our phenotype. Since ang na-produce natin is dominant, at sabi natin kanina, purple is the dominant color, then our phenotype is 4 or 100% purple flower. So if we produce a dominant one, then what would be the color of our flower? So the color of our flower will still be a purple flower. So meaning to say, on the first try of our monohybrid cross, kapag kinrossbreed natin ang isang puti sa isang purple na bulaklak, ang mangyayari is the result of the cross will be all purple. Meaning to say, lahat ng kulay na lalabas na bulaklak ay yung dominant na kulay, which is the color purple. Now, the question is, kailan ko makikita si recessive? Kailan ko makikita ang bulaklak na magkaroon ng puting kulay? Okay, so that would be our question. Now, on the purple result, so yung unang cross na ginawa natin would be called as the first filial generation. When we say first filial generation, yun yung unang henerasyon na nag-crossbreed ang ating parents na purple and white flower. So what if itong purple na na-produce natin ngayon will now have its new generation? Kumbaga si nanay at si tatay, ikaw na anak, ay, for example, magpo-produce ka na ng sarili mong offspring or anak. So let us make use now the first filial generation of the purple flower. We cross it itself with another purple flower, and let's see what would be the result. Okay, so let us now cross the two purple flowers of the first filial generation. Since our first filial generation produced a heterozygous dominant, so we will crossbreed a two heterozygous dominant purple flower, and let's see what would be the result. So since we have two heterozygous, so we have capital and small letter, will be crossed with another capital and small letter, which is both a dominant purple flower. So again, using the diagram of Punnett square, we will identify the result of our cross. Okay, so now let us talk about with the second generation na gagawin natin in the monohybrid cross. Since kanina nakapag-produce na tayo ng first filial generation na resulta ng dalawang parental generation, which is the purple and the white, at na-produce natin ay apat na heterozygous dominant. Ngayon, ang gagawin naman natin ay i-crossbreed ang dalawang first filial generation. In the first filial generation, our genotype is a capital P and a small letter p multiplied with another capital P and small letter p, which is now our two dominant purple flower. Ang ikinaiba nga lang, we will now make use of the heterozygous dominant flower. Kasi kanina, ang ginamit natin is homozygous kasi parental yung ginagamit natin. But since ang gagamitin natin ay yung resulta sa first filial generation, then our genes now will become the capital letter and the small letter, or in short, the heterozygous. Again, using our Punnett square, i-identify natin ano kaya ang kalalabasan ng cross kung dalawang dominant ang aking gagamitin. Pero dalawa man dominant, ang letter naman na gagamitin ko now is a result of the first filial generation, which is now heterozygous. So using our Punnett square, lagay ulit natin sa taas yung ating capital P and small letter p, and then lagay natin sa tagiliran si capital P and small letter p. On the first box, we will have capital P and a capital P kasi para silang capital. Now, on the second box, we will now have a small letter p and a capital P kasi small letter P yung nasa taas, ang nandun sa tagiliran is a capital P. So, magkaiba na yung letra. Isang maliit at isang malaki. Now, doon naman tayo sa baba. On the first box sa baba, we have a capital P and a small letter P. Isang malaki at isang maliit. Then, on the last box, maliit na letra at isang maliit na letra. So, on the last box, we will produce a small letter P and another small letter P. So, that would be now the result of our generation kapag ang ginamit natin ay dalawang galing sa first filial generation, which is heterozygous dominant. So, since ang ipinag-crossbreed natin dito ay galing sa first filial generation, then this generation, yung resulta nito now, will be called as second filial generation. Nakakalito ba? Balikan natin yung diagram. Simulan ulit natin kay parental. So, our parents, again, is a capital P for the dominant purple and a small letter P for the recessive. So, that is our parental generation. Kinrossbreed natin si parental generation. Nung kinrossbreed natin silang dalawa, anong na-produce natin? 4 na heterozygous dominant. Yung 4 na heterozygous dominant now is our first filial generation. Then, tinry natin ulit na i-crossbreed ang galing sa dalawang first filial generation, which is a capital P and small letter P. Kinrossbreed natin sa isa pang capital P and small letter P. Then, we produced a capital P and another capital P. Dalawang capital and small at isang parehas na small letter P. In short, balik tayo dun sa diagram ng ating Punnett square sa second filial generation. We do now the genotypic and the phenotypic ratio. In the genotypic ratio, sabi natin, alin ang titingnan? Titingnan natin yung mga letter o yung mga na-produce nating letters from the cross. So, meron tayong isang klase ng homozygous. When we say again homozygous, dalawang magkaparehas na letra. So, meron tayong isang homozygous dominant. So, we have the genotype 1 homozygous dominant. Then, meron tayong dalawang magkaibang letra. So, we have 2 heterozygous dominant. At may isa pa tayong natitira na parehas na maliit na letra, which is now our 1 recessive. Pwedeng homozygous recessive, pwede rin namang recessive itself. Now, on the second filial generation, ano yung napansin natin kakaiba? On the second filial generation, dun pa lang lalabas. So, dun pa lang natin makikita yung recessive trait. So, meaning to say, from the parental generation, nandun na si recessive, pero hindi siya nakita. On the first filial generation, nandun naman si recessive, pero hindi pa rin siya nakita. Then, on the second filial generation, saka pa lang natin nakikita yung recessive trait. Parang sa mga kamag-anak natin, parang sa pamilya natin. Yung trait ni nanay at ni tatay, for example, mas lamang ang namana galing sa tatay. Yung mga anak ngayon, parang laging hawig sa tatay. Pagdating sa apo, yun, dun nakikita yung recessive na meron si nanay o meron si lola. Kaya, yung iba sasabihin nagmana kay lola. Kahit hindi naman yun ang nanay at tatay mo, pero parang namana mo kay lola. It is because that the recessive trait o yung trait na hindi masyado nakikita, ay saka pa lang lalabas in the generation, which is on the second filial generation. Okay, balik tayo dun sa genotypic ratio. Now, on the genotypic ratio, pwedeng ratio na 1:2:1 or 25% is to 50% is to 25%. Basta maglalaging equal sa 100%. Pagdating naman dito sa ratio na 1:2:1, kailangan ng total palagi ay hanggang 4 lamang. It is because we only have 4 boxes. So that would be for the genotypic ratio. Kasi sa genotypic ratio, we're referring to the genes. And genes are represented using the letters. It's either capital or it's either a small letter. Okay, so that would be our genotypic ratio. So, ano magiging phenotypic ratio natin dun sa cross na nagawa natin from two heterozygous dominant? So, meron tayong homozygous dominant na isa at dalawang heterozygous dominant. Since silang tatlo ay para-parehas namang dominant at nagkaiba-iba lang naman sila ay sa genes, then we simply total it into 3. Since isang homo, dalawang hetero, para-parehas namang dominant, so that means that the phenotype or the expression of the trait is just the same, that they are all purple flower. So we have the phenotypic ratio 3 purple flower, and since meron tayong nag-iisang recessive o nag-iisang parehas na maliit na letra at ang kulay ng maliit na letra ay kulay puti, which is our recessive, then we produce only one recessive color, which is white. So we have 3 purple and 1 white flower. Or we have 75%. Kasi ang isang box ay 25, tatlo. So we have 25, 25, 25. So we have 75% purple and 25% white, which is still equivalent to 100%. Okay. So that would be our 3 generations in the monohybrid cross. We start with the parents. Then we produce the first filial generation. Wala ka doon makikitang recessive. Lahat lang ng makikita mo doon is dominant. Pero, mangyayari, may iba na yung genes. Magkakaroon na siya ngayon ng heterozygous dominant. Then, on the second filial generation, there are at least one that will produce the recessive trait. Okay. Let us have another example. What if we make use of hair texture? In the hair texture, we're referring to the curly hair, kulot na buhok, at straight hair, which is yung tuwid na buhok. Okay, for example, si nanay ay curly hair and si tatay will be a straight hair. Now, what would be the texture of the hair of their children or their offspring once that they have the cross? Okay, for example, magkakaroon na sila ng anak. So, ano kaya ang magiging itsura ng texture ng buhok ng anak nila kung ang nanay ay kulot at ang tatay naman ay straight hair? So, we make use again this Punnett square. Okay. So, let us use C for the genes. And let us, for example, say that curly hair is the dominant and the straight hair will be the recessive. So, meaning to say, dominant na characteristic ang tinataglay ng hair texture ni nanay kasi siya yung curly, and si tatay will be having the recessive trait. So, again, we make use of capital letter C for the curly hair and a small letter C for the straight hair. So, those are the parental generation, and we will identify the first filial generation. So, again, using the Punnett square, let us crossbreed a curly hair and a straight hair. So, let us put the dominant at the top, which is capital C and capital C, and on the side, let us put the recessive, which is a small letter C and another small letter C. On the first box, we'll have capital and a small letter. On the second box, we'll have another capital and small letter. And then on the third box, which is yung nasa baba, will be a capital letter and a small letter as well. Then, on the last box, we'll have another capital and small letter. So, obviously, it is just the same with our example with the color of the flower. Ano lang ang naiba? Ang naiba lang is yung letters. Kasi sa ngayon, ang gusto ko namang gamitin is letter C. The letters is not specific. You may use any letter that you want. Depends upon the given in the question. Kung ano binigay na letter sa question, din yun ang gagamitin ko. Pero hindi siya constant na ganitong letra lamang ang gagamitin. So, you may use any letter of the alphabet that you want. Yan. So, yung letter lang na iba, but still, we still produced a heterozygous dominant. We have the genotypic ratio of 4 heterozygous dominant or 100% heterozygous dominant, and we have the phenotypic ratio of 100% curly hair or 4 curly hair. So, halos parehas lang din. Ang naiba lang is yung characteristic or yung allele and the letters, kung anong letters yung ginagamit natin. So, lagyan natin ngayon ng kaunting twist. Ayan. What if a heterozygous, meaning to say ay isang malaki, isang maliit na letra, a heterozygous female is married to a homozygous recessive. Okay. So, since our female is a heterozygous, so we have one capital letter and one small letter. So, nakapangasawa daw itong heterozygous woman, which is curly hair kasi yun yung dominant natin. Nakapangasawa itong si heterozygous dominant curly hair ng isang lalaki na homozygous recessive. So, meaning to say ay dalawang maliit na letter C kasi siya ay recessive. So, what would be the result of their offspring if one is a heterozygous dominant and the other one is a recessive trait? So, let us try. So, using our Punnett square, let us put the female or the dominant at the top, which is a heterozygous. And then, we put the recessive on the side. So, when we cross our parental generation, so we have heterozygous capital P and one small letter. C. A capital C and a small letter C. On the next box, we have a small letter C and another small letter C. Now, on the third box sa baba, we have a capital letter C and the small letter C. And then on the last box, we have a small letter C and another small letter C. Okay. So, from the letters itself, nakikinikinita na natin kung anong kinalabasan ng ating offspring. So, let us identify it using our genotypic ratio and the phenotypic ratio. So, let us have first the genotypic ratio. On the genotypic ratio, meron tayong dalawang klase ng letra na nakikita. One is a capital and a small letter. So, we have a capital C and a small letter C. Ilang ganon? Meron tayong isa, dalawa. So, meron tayong dalawang two heterozygous dominant or 50% heterozygous dominant. Then, on the other hand, may natitira pa tayong dalawang klase. Now, we have two recessive or 50% recessive. Pwede may homozygous, pwede rin namang wala, pwedeng diretsong recessive. Now, on the genotypic ratio, we have just produced a 50% heterozygous dominant and another 50% recessive. Then, on the phenotypic ratio, ang titingnan naman natin is yung expression ng genes which has curly and straight hair. Sabi natin kanina, the dominant one is the curly and the recessive is the straight one. So since we have a heterozygous dominant, then we have also 50% curly hair and we also have 50% na straight hair. Or we have the ratio of 2:2. Dalawang curly at dalawang straight hair. So that would be the expression of the trait if you crossbreed or if you have a monohybrid with a curly na heterozygous and a recessive trait. Okay. So that would be the result. Now, on this part, I will let you do on your own. So you practice your own. You practice answering on your own problem of monohybrid cross. And let's see if you got it correct. So I will post the correct answer for our questions given in this video. So the question is this. And that's it for our discussion today in our first part of our video, which just focuses on a review on the monohybrid cross. Bakit ba natin i-review si monohybrid cross? Kasi gagamitin natin siya para sa mga lessons natin in our next videos. And ito yung una nating dapat malaman at dapat nating i-review para makapag-crossbreed tayo ng mga kasunod pa nating topic sa genetics. So I hope that you reminisced or you recalled how do we do the monohybrid cross. Since you already learned this from your previous grade level, so I hope that this is just a simple review. Pinaalala lang natin ng kauntian kung paano ba tayo nagko-crossbreed using Punnett square. Kasi baka may ilan sa inyo na nakalimot na kung paano gumamit ng Punnett square. At least on this video, meron tayong babalikan paano nga ba nagmumultiply ng letters sa monohybrid cross. And I hope that you can get along with our discussion today because it's somewhat nakakalito, parang hirap tingnan, parang hindi mo magets agad. So that's the usual reaction of the students if we are in the usual classroom situation. From my previous experiences with my students, medyo dito sila litong-lito sa kung paano ba tayo nagmumultiply ng letters. But I do hope this video would help you to understand the monohybrid cross and the crossing of the genes. So thank you for listening on the first part of our video and hope to see you again on the next videos.